DC Comics might not be getting a ton right lately, but they are certainly getting Superman right. Superman by Josh Williamson, at least until the Lex Luther Revenge Squad ending, has been pretty damn solid. Before that, we had Phil Kennedy Johnson on Action Comics for a couple of years, Warworld Saga, and some other stories in there, which was absolutely awesome. Unfortunately, he had to step to the side for this Superstars of Superman initiative. We've got this Bizarro story from Jason Aaron, which started out fine. I was reminded why you don't need to do 3 issues straight on Bizarro. Didn't really do it for me, but now we have Josh Williamson stepping onto Action Comics, staying on Superman for basically a Superman mini event contained within Action Comics and Superman. And I'm here to talk about Action Comics 1064, the first chapter of House of Braniac, written by Josh Williamson, illustrated by Rafa Sandoval, who normally I love on like Green Lantern and Flash. I didn't realize how much I was going to love him on Superman. Absolutely fantastic stuff here. Real surprise to me. The last DC event, Beast World, was actually kind of fun. It was actually pretty good, surprisingly, after just a string of really lackluster and terrible events by DC Comics. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are talking about House of Braniac, and it is kind of setting up at least parts of whatever Absolute Power is going to be the next big DC Comics event. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of just how awesome this has the potential to be, because the first issue in this is, quite frankly, borderline spectacular. I really enjoyed this issue, and I want to get the word out that perhaps it's time to jump in on Action Comics and Superman if you have not done that. If you want a really fun, cool Brainiac story, my personal favorite Superman story of all time, Superman Up, Up, and Away, happened between the pages of Superman and Action Comics. So there's a precedent for doing this. That one was Jeff Johns on one side, Kurt Busiek on the other. This one, we're going to have one creator, but I'm really excited about this after the opening salvo for what seems like it's likely to be a really fun, action-packed, really well-illustrated, fun action adventure, obviously with Superman and basically the entire Superman family. We have to get into the art first. This is the thing that really stood out to me. It's not like Rafa Sandoval has never illustrated Superman, but I more associate him with his work on Green Lantern. I think he's done great work on Flash. But my goodness, he really makes Superman look great here. There's an opening sequence where they're showing, Superman beginning his day, and he's like flying around with seagulls, and there's dolphins, and he's, basically going through a wave. He might even fly over like a soccer stadium and high-five a kid that's in the stands and stuff. And it makes Superman look absolutely awesome. And I really love the illustrations. There is a ton of action. In fact, this entire comic book is almost wall-to-wall action after the opening introduction that kind of reminds you of the breadth of characters involved with the Superman family. I'll get to that here in a few moments, but the action is fast-paced, it's vibrant. There are Khazardians here, we got Brainiac robots here, we got Brainiac's like skull shuttle that's going through space here, the entire Superman family, all of Metropolis, and they're all kind of coming together and battling out on the streets of Metropolis. And Rafa Sandoval, a tip of the cap to you, sir, because you knocked this one out of the park. You really captured the essence of Superman and what he means to the world, but also just how high the stakes are within this comic book because of all the violence with everything going down with the Superman family in Metropolis. A wonderfully illustrated comic book, and I'm very excited. Rafa Sandoval is not only going to be illustrating the Action Comics portion of this story, but also the Superman portion. There's also going to be like a House of Braniac special. I'm not sure if he's going to be illustrating that one, but the more Rafa Sandoval on Superman, the better. And also a tip of the cap to Alejandro Sanchez, not someone I normally associate with being a top colorist within the comic book industry, but he also does yeoman's work here, does a really great job of making these awesome characters stand out. As I mentioned, there is a ton of action here because after the opening sequence, which I'll get to kind of at the end because it's the least interesting part of it, but something I definitely need to address. Basically, you just see an entire squad of Brainiac robots and Khazardians descending down onto Metropolis. It almost felt like one of those World War II aerial jumps where you had all those people in the sky like coming down on it. Superman realizes what's happening, and there are a lot of members of the Superman family in the city, and they basically start going to war immediately. Now, there are so many characters that it does become a little bit difficult to discern who's doing exactly what, but that kind of makes sense, and that does happen when you have a comic book in an action sequence like this that's overstuffed with characters. And obviously Josh Williamson and Rafa Sandoval are making sure that all the other superheroes besides Superman get their stuff in during this, because it is a very big battle. We do get a few ideas of what's going on here. Initially, they say they're not really here for Superman. They're here for the world's smartest man. We do see Lex Luthor, and my assumption is that they're actually here for Lex Luthor. At least that's what it appears to be early on. And Superman realizes something is wrong here. This is far too chaotic to be the work of Brainiac himself. The Khazarians are uncontrollable. You can't really predict even what they're going to do. And to Superman, with his experience, and I think Supergirl as well, they're like, yeah, this doesn't really feel like what Brainiac would do or one of his plans. And then you start getting an idea of what's actually happening as they're basically capturing every single member of the Superman family that's out there. Obviously, the big prize is going to be Superman himself. We do get introduced to this character. We don't see a lot of Zarnians out there, Lobo being the most famous one out there. You also do have his daughter, Crush. But this is supposed to be an extinct race. I'm not really sure how Brainiac was able to procure this many Zardian soldiers for the attack on Metropolis, but obviously they're there. And I imagine that'll be fleshed out eventually, or maybe it was already talked about in a backup story, but I didn't see it. The only Zarnian we're introduced to that really has any type of personality or really stands out because of his look, they do make him look really cool, is General Chakal. He's actually been sent in to do the heavy lifting. He's actually the one that's leading the Khazarian army on behalf of Brainiac, completely working for him. And there are multiple references to Lobo during this, but it appears Lobo is unaware or has never even met these particular Zarnians themselves. Like, it appears that they've heard of Lobo, maybe Lobo has heard of them, but they've had no contact. He even calls him some type of geekoid, because rumor has it that Lobo's been defeated by Superman a couple of times, and he's like, you don't seem like much. But once a key piece of information gets out there, it turns out that Clark Kent, Superman, was playing a little bit of possum. Unfortunately for General Chakal and the other members of this army, they are on time constraints. Brainiac wants to get out of there before the rest of the Justice League and the Titans and everyone else shows up to defend Metropolis alongside Superman. And the final goal was to get Superman himself. But somebody made a sacrifice. We also get another reveal illustrating the depths of planning that Brainiac has actually done. It isn't quite as random as it may seem at first. There's this character, this version of Lex Luthor, and they are kind of slowly morphing Lex Luthor almost into the DC Comics version of Iron Man, which is basically what Steel is already. But apparently he had created this alternate version of his consciousness called LL01, that had been mentoring and advising Supercorp, including like Superman, who's at the charge of it. He's like the CEO of Supercorp while Lex Luthor is in jail. And this is supposed to be like all of his knowledge so he can go out there and aid everybody. It turns out Lex Luthor never created this program. He didn't create a subconscious for himself to basically be like an avatar or a digital stand-in for himself while he was in prison. This was actually all designed and created by Brainiac himself to help infiltrate Metropolis and Supercorp and get into the Superman family and get all their secrets and everything, because it's clear that Brainiac knows that he's missing something, and that's why he's come here basically to capture all these Superman family characters. Not all of them are Kryptonians, not all of them have powers like Superman, but they're all characters related to Superman. But he was also able to infiltrate Supercorp and probably dig up a lot of their secrets or whatever for whatever the big plan that Brainiac is trying to enact. We still do not know exactly what that is, but I did think this was a cool moment. I'm glad this wasn't like the final page reveal, because it would have been a letdown as a final page reveal. Like, oh my goodness, the digital avatar of Lex Luthor was Brainiac the whole time, because they never really made a big deal out of LL01. But as a mid-story reveal, kind of showing the depths of what Brainiac was actually up to the whole time, unbeknownst to essentially everyone, including Superman, I thought it was really effective. If you feel like you would be overwhelmed with the amount of Superman characters and what they're up to, that you wouldn't be able to get into this because you haven't been reading action or you haven't been reading Superman, and there are a ton of heroes in this that are fighting against this army. Josh Williamson does a really good job with the opening setup. Even before you see Superman flying around and high-fiving the kid and he's got dolphins and all that kind of stuff. Basically, Lois Lane has her first day off, and it seems like a year or something, maybe a couple of years, and she's jogging through Metropolis, and it's introducing you to all the members of the Superman family and what their roles are or what their powers are and stuff like that, which I thought was really, really effective, because there are so many of them that are related to the Superman family at this point that it is absolutely overwhelming. There are far too many Superman family members. It's actually really, really ridiculous. And when I opened it up and I was reading, I was like, man, this is a great reminder that Josh Williamson probably needs to kill off a lot of these. You got Superboy Connor Kent, you've got the Super Twins, Superman of China, you got Superwoman, Supergirl, and all these characters. And there's way more than I'm showing you right here, because I believe it goes on for 3 pages with the character introductions and reminding you of who they are. But I thought it was really effective to say, hey, these are all the characters that you need to know that are in Metropolis at this moment. There were 2 huge characters that were missing that were very conspicuous by their absence. The first being Superboy John Kent. Never mentioned, never seen, does not fight side by side with any of his family members. Now, I do know in the recent issue of Suicide Squad Dream Team that Bizarro, who's in that one, does something with Jay Nakamura's mother that might necessitate John Kent actually going with Jay Nakamura to the island of Gomorrah or whatever to go deal with that. Perhaps that's why they left him out. Perhaps they want Superman and Superboy to team up and him to be the other real superpowered ally that Superman has during this event. I'm not really sure at this point. So there is a logical explanation why he's not there, because he could be with Jay Nakamura right now because he did have a family emergency. So I'm not really sure, but that one felt really obvious. It's like, where's John Kent? The other one is Power Girl. There is an ongoing Power Girl series written by Leah Williams that is going to be tying into House of Braniac, but the entire issues, I think for the next 3, are going to be tied into this. Perhaps they left her to the side to have her own adventure, whatever it is that Superman sets her off to do. So those are kind of the 2 bigger ones that I noticed weren't there that you would have expected to be in Metropolis. I have not been reading Power Girl. Perhaps she's somewhere else trying to discover herself. It feels like that was what Leah Williams was trying to set up before I bounced out of that comic book because it was so bad. Regardless, this was really effective in introducing you and getting you caught up into the depths of the Superman family who's in Metropolis when this attack happens. But also you get a pretty comical payoff that I thought was really effective. Certainly Clark Kent was the butt of the joke, but it didn't feel mean-spirited and it didn't detract from the character. It almost was celebrating his nerdiness, which I thought was a good chuckle before you got into all the serious business and all the things going around Metropolis that were absolutely insane going on at the same time. Like I said, the entire Superman family is involved in this one. Certainly am highly recommending Action Comics 1064. And if you were on the fence, or maybe you were even unaware of House of Braniac, and I do think a lot of people are unaware that House of Braniac is a Superman kind of mini event happening in Superman with some tie-ins. There's a backup story in Green Lantern, and then there's also Power Girl that'll be fully tying into this. Her entire stories will be about House of Braniac. And this is leading up to, whatever happens in Absolute Power. We do know that Brainiac Queen, which will be introduced in House of Braniac, is going to be one of the Trinity of Evil or whatever. DC events have not been very good for a long time, but Beast World was admittedly fun, and it does appear, at least to me, that House of Braniac is a lot of fun out the gate. Really enjoyed this one. It felt like they threw the stakes through the roof on this. Lots of things happening. Is it overstuffed? Perhaps, but I do think this is the way to kick off an event and get people really excited and really intrigued about it. Now, I know Josh Williamson has a reputation, at least for me, and I know a lot of people feel similarly about this, that he can't stick the landing on the story. We shall see. Hopefully this is the one where he really nails it, because he's really come out of the gate strong, and I have a lot of interest in House of Braniac, and I will definitely be seeing this one all the way through. The Rafa Sandoval art is fantastic. It's a fun, fast-paced story, and if you haven't checked this one out, I think you should go to your comic book shop today and hope that they still have a copy of Action Comics 1064. Reserve your copy of the next Superman, because I think a lot of people will really enjoy House of Braniac. I know I had a great deal of fun with it. If you would like more comic book reviews and comic book discussions and all that kind of stuff, there is one place even better than Thinking Critical YouTube. That is Thinking Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. Fantastic podcast going all week long. We'll have further discussions about House of Braniac and all the things happening at Marvel, DC, and Indies with Jim from Weird Science. I have a special guest filling in for Doc this week. I think a lot of people are going to be a little blown away by that one, but it's really, really exciting stuff. If you haven't checked out the Patreon, there's a free trial going on right now, and I think we have a lot of stuff you would love.